Waiting with
is on.
Welcome to the DXswap strategy chat for November 6th. I wanted to start with a couple, kind of two different documents that I thought could kind of kick off the conversation here. And as we kind of try to reach some consensus on the different things that we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks. So the first is this kind of consensus dashboard I have here. And so here I just have, I guess, like the kind of certain different things that we are discussing and I have different levels of consensus on. So things like the default fee, which we've discussed before. There's now a proposal that should pass that is signaling 0.25%, protocol fee 1.2. These we have pretty strong consensus on. I think Dxd ETH incentives and other LP incentives, we kind of need more discussion on that. I think we're lacking in some of those areas. And then I think these three are ones that we're getting there and we need to kind of get some type of consensus or get to the bottom on that. And that's the three deployment pools that will be initially yeah. And so just kind of, this is where we're at in terms of laying out the different items that need to be discussed. And then I wanted to kind of switch over to the document, kind of laying out what I would, what is a strategy kind of plan, kind of just a consensus on a whole bunch of things that we've kind of been talking about here. So things that we've been talking about in the launch. So that's proposals to be passed, what their initial fees, base pairs, the whole relayer. Second is incentives and DXD ETH pool. So like what would this entail? And again, in terms of like proposals and actually what are our plans for incentives? And then like a little bit getting into the medium and long term in terms of pool governance. And then just to give a brief preview of what kind of the end, this is kind of what I'm seeing as the major steps over the next couple of weeks and months, right? So if we launch, when we launch the first version, right, that'll live live on mainnet and we'll be able to access it, but won't have any, there'll still be a couple different features that we'll be adding. So I think the kind of main stages of that are: one, DXswap supplied liquidity, which will be in days or weeks after the launch. Two, conditional token yield farming. We'll get to explain that in a second, but that's in the weeks or months after launch. Three, router aggregation. This would be including Uniswap pools for trading on DXswap, and that could be in weeks or months. And then four, LP guild governance and updated UI, and that's a couple months. And then I just kind of put the DeFi Hub as a several months there. And so just kind of walking through a bit of this document, I'm not going to read it, of course, but the deployer smart contracts are kind of the core base of DXswap. And so you can kind of see the inputs of that are: one, the protocol fee, which we have at 1/10 of that, two, the default fee, which will be set at 0.25% if this proposal passes. And then the three pools look good. And I'm just looking at Augusta's comment. So the three deployment pools looked good. They have a 0.15% fee. And we'll get to that in a minute, because I think we're gonna have to finalize that. So this is the smart contracts, right? So they'll be deployed, and then there's actually nothing, correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually nothing in the deployment of the smart contracts that needs to go through a proposal on DXDAO. It's more of the contracts themselves are like set to be governed by DXDAO. Things that were, or no.
Oh, correct. The deployer contract can be deployed by anybody, and then it needs to be funded by a funding proposal to DXDAO from DXDAO in order, because it only accepts Ether. It needs Ether to do the deployment, and it only accepts Ether from DXDAO. So it's sort of a way for DXDAO to authorize that.
And that's separate than the relayer. Like that would just be ETH sent.
This is the first step. This is some community member can put the deployer contracts out there. Then they can make a proposal to the DXDAO in the funding scheme that says send, whatever, 0.2 ETH or whatever is necessary to the deployer contracts. If that gets passed, people who are voting can look at the contracts, make sure they're good, make sure everything looks up to snuff. If that passes, and then the DAO is essentially authorized those to be deployed, and anybody can call the deploy function on that contract, and that will set up the core contracts, like the factory, the fee receiver, and the fee setter, and it will also initialize these initial three pairs. Augusto is the expert on this. I'm just summarizing.
Yeah, basically what John said, like this, the contract will be ratified by DXDAO. Imagine a proposal that is going to say, hey, this is the DXswap deployer contract. This is what it's going to do once you send funds. And the pools are going to be created with which fee. And this is, to reach that, we will need to reach consensus on the proposal level. So again, that can be used as a way to ratify on the governance level what we are going to deploy on DXswap. Like, we don't need to submit any more proposals to say, hey, this is the fee that we want to use. Hey, this is what we want to do. We can just create the DXswap deployer with the configuration that is going to be used, and then it can be approved by DXDAO. For example, now the proposal where we agree to change the fee, that would have been able to be done on the DXswap deployer contract, right? For example, we decide internally we want to change the fee. We can submit a proposal to use the DXswap deployer with a different fee than the one that was agreed upon, and the DXDAO will still need to agree on that fee, and it can agree and deploy DXswap at the same time.
Cool. And so then that will go through what the similar process that we've kind of perfected, I would say, a little bit with Omen and Mesa, of updating the front end. And so for this, we'll need to, the front end will need to be deployed to IPFS by some member of the community, and then a proposal will need to be submitted through Alchemy resolving DXswap.eth to the IPFS hash of the DApp. And so just thinking in time lines here, that'll take 7 days, basically, from 7 days plus a day of boosting to kind of fully pass and resolve that way. And then the next step in this initial launch idea is the liquidity provisioning here. So of course, for this, we've been working on the relayer here, and the consensus now is not to use DXD in a treasury provide liquidity. And I believe we're on consensus to use the same pairs from the previous signal proposal, but we'll have to talk again about fees for them. Just to close us off before we kick it off to questions and comments, this is what I've just put together as a launch timeline, and this is just me. This is not speak for DXDAO or anyone else. I'm just kind of trying to put some estimates on these things. So testing on Rinkeby with updated UI kind of all through next week, and then some point there would be a mainnet contract deployment sometime next week by a member of the community. And then this is what I was just adding to the timeline now, that would be like something like a proposal to authorize the deployer. So presumably that would be submitted sometime next, or could be submitted right after the main contracts were deployed, and then that would be passed 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 days later on November 22nd to the 27th. And then the front end, once we know where the contracts are, we can then submit a proposal to resolve the DNS to the IPFS hash. So if we can do that sometime after the mainnet contract deployment, and then that proposal will go in there, and then hopefully sometime be approved 23rd through the 27th. And then the relayer mainnet deployment, I just put this timeline out here. This would be 2 weeks from Monday, the week of that. It's also the week of Thanksgiving in the US. So if that went through sometime that week, then we could then submit a proposal, assuming the multi-call scheme and everything goes smoothly there. We could submit a proposal this last week of November and then executed the December 3rd through 7th. So that was just what I laid out there. Augusto, I see you want to speak. So shoot.
Yeah, I just want to give us a small declaration on which step is going to require the more active governance, and it's going to be the proposal to resolve ENS to IPFS hash, because that is the amount of time that proposal is going to take to be executed is time that the DXswap will be deployed on the blockchain level, which means that it will be able to be used by anyone by connecting to the smart contracts. But we don't have the dApp deployed on, for example, any domain that we are going to use. Let's say DXswap.eth, right? So on that proposal, it would be awesome if we can organize to reach a majority vote. So when DXswap deployer, that we can keep track. For example, when DXswap deployer gets approved, it will get deployed, and right after that, someone will make the build using the smart contract that we are going to have for DXswap, assign the IPFS hash, create a proposal, and that amount of time after it gets executed is time where it's going to be online on the blockchain level, but we are not going to have the app deployed. So it will be great to have the less time possible where someone can be using our smart contracts, and that is not going to be us.
So when you say active governance, Augusto, I think are you saying it would be nice if we could get a majority vote and pass it quickly, right?
Yes, that's the most important proposal of all, to assign the IPFS of the DXswap, to have the less time possible where DXswap is going to be working on the blockchain level, but not on the user interface level.
Well, presumably the proposal would have the IPFS link where the dApp would be hosted. So like people could go to the proposal, even if it hasn't passed, and be able to see that that's where the dApp itself would be hosted.
Yes, but well, it would be awesome to have it like verified.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah.
Other kind of thoughts, comments on this? I don't know how this timeline looks in terms of both the kind of development and also proposal process.
The timeline looks good. I just had a quick question, and I probably mixed this up, but I know originally PNK and DMG, like the reason we wanted those pools were they were against DXD, but now we're obviously not really supplying DXD. But does it make sense to launch like PNK ETH and DMG ETH pools, or just like, does that benefit us to do that or not in ETH? Or do you launch PNK DXD and hope that the community supplies liquidity to those? So I thought the whole point originally was to do it against DXD and have DXD as like the key base currency for like related projects to DXDAO. But if we're not going to supply liquidity, we need the community to do it, I guess. Right?
Yeah, at first, yes.
Mix that up.
Yeah, I was actually looking, trying to pull up the proposal on whether it did say PNK DXD or PNK ETH. The same for DMG.
I was thinking we were doing, we always had a goal to like do like projects related to DXDAO and use DXD as the main core base routing currency, I think. So, but it doesn't really work unless the community supplies that liquidity, I guess, right? But you could still launch the pairs. They just might not have any liquidity at first, or a tiny bit. Because like, you could launch PNK ETH and then the community provides ETH DXD, and then you can do PNK DXD, you have a routed pair, but does anyone want to trade that? I don't know. I think the goal was to have DXD as the interchanging currency.
Yeah, we should talk with the project owners of the currency that we wanna use, like like for example with Kleros and with well, these guys that have DMG, and talk to them if they are interested in also supporting DXC, because maybe there's something that they can take, like a responsibility, something that they can take at the beginning. I know, maybe we can pay them something in return, like a small incentive, because they are providing also DXD as base pair, because right now everyone is going to use Ether as base pair, but the idea is to have also DXC as base pair too. So maybe we can create an incentive there or a reward for someone who provides liquidity using DXD as base pair. That would be interesting.
I think it would be good to talk to the projects. Basically find pairs that we can target to try to make the best liquidity on DXswap and kind of leverage the different tools that we have. Like if there's a relationship with that project, maybe we can figure out something with them. If they're already providing liquidity on Uniswap, they maybe move it, or we can do some kind of combined incentive program or leveraging the liquidity we have in the treasury if necessary. Obviously, we run into the same problem. If we want to do a DXD DMG pair, then we are providing DXD from the treasury, which is maybe not a good thing for the same reasons as DXD ETH. And then I think if we use ETH and DMG or ETH and PNK, then we just have to realize that we're exposing ourselves to the price of those tokens, right? And if they drop, then we're losing ETH as well, right?
So can we talk the deployment pools, just to kind of nail that down? So that is these are the three pools that will go into the original deployer, that are inputs into the original deployer contract. And what should we be thinking about with those pairs? Like, what is important that they do? I think they're base pairs, so trades will more be routed through them. And then, like, secondly, what is our consensus on what those three deployment pools are?
The important thing on those base pairs, those base pools that, as you say, Chris, are going to be used a lot for routing, is to have a competitive fee, like a more competitive fee than our competitors. So it will be on. Also, those are pairs where I guess the liquidity providers are used to provide liquidity, are widely used tokens. So the idea will be to have a lower fee than the default one to acquire as much trades as we can.
And so then would it be wise to do the three deployment pools as each of the ETH stablecoins, right? ETH DAI, ETH USDC, ETH USDT, and then even have lower fees, because those would be good base pairs, because those are like common throughout a bunch of different pools. Then obviously, since the fees would be low on that, then the low fees on that would kind of proliferate to almost all trades on DXswap, because those would be the pools that would be used a lot. And the low fees would make sense here, because this would be, well, I guess it wouldn't be DXDAO provided liquidity. So we'd have to make sure we kind of get some of this ETH stablecoin liquidity if we were going to use that as part of the three deployment pools.
Yes, we need a lower fee, and again, this later can be changed if we see that there is not a lot of things happen. But I think, like, for example, like a half of the fee that is being used on Uniswap is a very good starting point there. And this also, like, makes clear which are going to be the initial base pairs on the app. On Uniswap, because this is going to be hard-coded on the front end at first. On Uniswap, it is Ether, WETH, DAI, USDT, USDC, and that's it. There is no other base pair on mainnet.
MKR and Comp, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay. MKR and Comp also too. But maybe this one can be were only 3 base pairs at the beginning, Ether, DXD, and these 3 base tokens, and then we can add more. Or maybe we are going to have the feature where someone can add another custom base pairs. But yeah.
Cool.
Go ahead. Hope was doing the hand things. So feel free.
Yeah. Hey, the problem with lowering the fees is that you won't be able to attract any more liquidity than the one that we're providing. And I don't think the one we're providing is enough to be competitive, even if the fees are super low.
Why not? The lower fee, the more trades, the higher liquidity that you're going to be farming.
Sorry?
Lower fees means more trades, means more liquidity, means more.
No, you're only getting more trades if you can offer the best price. And because our liquidity is so low, we are not able to offer the best price.
Why not? I mean, what do you mean that our liquidity is going to be low? We are talking about providing liquidity.
Yeah, we're talking about very low liquidity that we're providing as a DXDAO, and that is not enough to be competitive with these, huge liquidity pools in Uniswap, etc.
Yeah, we should provide more liquidity then.
No, Uniswap has like
we don't have enough money to be competitive in that regard.
Uniswap has what is it, like $500 million in each of those pools? What is the deal with their? I mean, I imagine they will keep a pretty big amount even after their rewards end up. But when did their rewards are ending in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, they're ending pretty soon, but they're probably gonna provide new rewards.
Yeah. So USDC, there's 300 million USDC in Uniswap. There's 330 million Tether, 200 million DAI. So it's not feasible to compete with them on a depth or like liquidity basis. I think if you have really low fees, you can compete on very small trades, but that very quickly it goes away. I forget what the number. We calculated that number at some point, Chris, right? Like, but it's not.
It's like 500.
Doesn't get you very far.
Like 500. I think with like a 200K or it's like 250K pool, you basically in lower fees, 0.15%. It only works on trades, I think, under $600, where it's cheaper. Even though you have low fees, the slippage that you would incur on a 200K pool would counteract any savings you had from fees.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, to use DXswap, we want people to be able to enter through stablecoins, right? So there is important to have liquidity in that sense. It's going to be a problem from the beginning if there's like just not much liquidity in those pools. But I think the aggregation of the Uniswap liquidity like solves that problem for the DXswap user. Like we can then take people through these super liquid Uniswap pools.
Yeah, I mean, because since we are trying to, this is an input to the deployer contract, like I feel like we want to have the conversation focused on like how it will affect this in like the next month or two. Or is like this conversation, we want these base pairs as the long term, because that's going to be like the most efficient way for DXswap. And even if it's like a bad experience for the first couple months, that like that's what we need, because this is a core part of the strategy. And I guess we wouldn't be able to change what these base pairs are, or like should we be concerned about how this affects like the next 6 weeks or like 6 months, I guess?
I mean, I would hope that we could have the aggregation feature in a couple months. So I think like, you know, this is more of going to be an issue for the first couple of months after the launch. That's my hope. I don't hold me to that, but.
So I'm saying like what we should decide now should maximize our position for the next couple months, or like 6 weeks to a couple months.
Because the fees can also be changed in the future.
Yeah, because we can change them, or we can aggregation will kind of solve all our problems. So I feel like our strategy here should be tailored towards the next 6 to 8 weeks.
I guess, I mean, you could say maybe if we have some success, right, there will be some demand for the stablecoin trades. And so that maybe the trading fees themselves would like justify like smaller, you know, some liquidity provision, right? Plus there's probably people that may just want to do it to help out. Right? But it's not going to be, I wouldn't count on a lot. So then the question is like, what do you want that in that case? Do you want to have a little bit higher fees to like make that enticing to those liquidity providers, or do you want lower fees to make it competitive for small trades? I guess that's the.
So there are actually two different things we're deciding here. The one is what are those 3 pools, and then 2 is what are the fees on them. So I guess what are those pools? We're in pretty much agreement that it like should definitely be the stable coins, because that's, or the ETH and stable coins. And then the second component is what are the fees that we're going to set those.
Well, to back up, like these 3 pools, it's not like the DXswap is limited to these 3 pools. These are just the 3 that can, from the very first day, have different than the default. So basically, like I think it's, you would only want to do this if there's any pools that you'd rather not have a 0.25% fee. So if there's something you want lower, something you want higher, this is the opportunity to do it for up to 3 pools from the very beginning. And like within a couple of months, we'll be able to adjust the fees on any pool. But yeah.
In a couple of months, no, we are able to adjust the fee like from the very beginning. We need a multi-call like.
We need to install the scheme. Yeah. I'm being a little conservative. I think it'll be 2 months.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that is going. The multi-call scheme thing.
So I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Can we just create an omen market for each of those pools?
To incentivize some liquidity on them? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Good segue if we're ready for that. Or Nico, I saw that you had you went unmuted for a second. I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's relevant, but I can give a short update on the multi-call, but I think it's not that much relevant here, right?
Yeah, you just wanted to respond to it, Gusto. But so the kind of first, just to turn back to the document. So we were kind of talking about the initial launch phase. And I think those are decisions that are kind of needed in terms of governance in the short term. And there's lots of proposals and things that we need to come to agreement on. And then I think in the medium term are things that we're still kind of working on. And Pulp, this is what you had mentioned. So I think where we've netted out with the with DXD liquidity provided by DXDAO is that DXDAO does not want to compete with DXD LPs. We don't. There's DXswap should be the home and the primary venue to be able to trade DXD, but it's best for all parties if we can figure out how to coordinate and make DXswap the best place to trade that without the DXDAO providing liquidity itself at these prices. So the way that we do that, and this is kind of what I'm calling, I don't know, the Dxd Liquidity Commitment. So one, this is kind of what I just said, DXswap should be the largest DXD liquidity source. And two, DXDAO will fund an omen market as a bounty to incentivize DXD deposits. DXDAO will buy no shares in the market, will DXswap DXD ETH pool be above $200,000 on January 1st, 2021? This encourages DX holders to buy yes shares and deposit in DXswap. And then in the signal proposal, indicate if the DXswap pool is less than 200,000 on January 1st, 2021, then DXDAO will supply liquidity itself coming from the treasury. And of course, the numbers here I just kind of pulled out, and also the dates, although I think something about like two or 3 months away is realistic. So I think there's like a DXD liquidity commitment on the DXD ETH pair. And I think there should be like a specific signal proposal saying that DXDAO wants to a certain amount of liquidity be in there, and that it's willing to provide it themselves if it doesn't reach that component. And then I think separately from that, or on top of that, we should really lean into Omen as an incentive mechanism for DXswap liquidity. And I think what we're actually, I think we need a cooler name than this, but conditional token yield farming, just because it's a little long and there's so many possibilities with farming here. But very simply, we would fund and create Omen markets that would pay out if certain liquidity thresholds are met for each pool. And then we would issue, I believe, wrapped conditional tokens to liquidity providers of those pools in order to incentivize them to stay in the pool. I think this is a really cool idea that kind of incorporates other DXDAO products and is kind of on the bleeding edge of governance and forward signaling in a lot of ways. It does require a lot more fleshing out, and I think development work, especially on like how DXDAO would fund these pools themselves. But I think that we're leaning towards consensus that this kind of conditional token yield farming should be the core of the liquidity incentive strategy. The last thing I would say is we have not completely ruled out, though, just DXD rewards as a way of incentivizing LPs directly, particularly in the DXD ETH pool. So thoughts?
Yeah.
Comments?
So the market like that, we have to put some more thought into it, but that market doesn't really work because you can't say 200,000 on January 1st, 2021, because then people can just do it on the day before. So it has to be a continuous. It has to be like between December 15th and January 1st. Like it has to be above the whole time.
Okay.
So some continuous.
Yeah, that's just in wording though, right? Like you can accomplish that with a different wording of the question.
Yeah, but people are very good at gaming these things, so it's like very specific what we're gonna have.
Yeah, I agree, because like even me writing this sentence like took me, like I was like, man, how exactly am I going to word this in that way? And I don't know, prediction markets make you think a lot more about how to be tight with your wording.
Semantically correct.
Basically, like the first thing you have to, when you look at any new prediction market, is like the first thing to think about is like, can someone do something on a specific time in the future to like totally game that market? And like most of them you can. So that's tricky. Yeah.
But I think you could word this in a way that says like, will the liquidity in this pool reach X dollars by, January 1st and stay above X dollars, through whatever date, right?
Yeah. Which would take continuous monitoring then too. But what people have done this same idea, not with cool like Omen tokens, but they have taken snapshots. Like December 1st, you take a snapshot of the LPs, and then there's an ending date, like January 1st, there's a snapshot. And actually, so that's 2 snapshots, but then the person says, oh, at 2 times during the month, random times, I'm going to also take a snapshot. So there's 4 snapshots total. And you, as an LP, better be in all 4 of those snapshots. Otherwise, you don't get the reward. So that's one way to do it. It's like different random snapshots.
I think it was one of the agricultural forefathers, Cain, who said that like all liquidity reward schemes will be cheated or gamified, right? Like people will figure out how to try to exploit whatever scheme is kind of set. So we have to be nimble in how we react to that and make sure that we're not, leaving ourselves susceptible to that. But I think we can figure out exactly how to design something. I think there's also like the kind of funding and market creation part, and I guess the wrapping, the tokens, but I feel like that's all something that we've been talking about with the Omen squad in general too.
Yeah, we're a little bit far away from the DAO or even the multi-sig being able to take these actions in order to get this done, but we're working on that. We're pushing Gnosis pretty hard to make the Gnosis wallet be able to do it. But the Explorer is a whole nother thing.
So on that front, we already have a pull request which updates the library, which is kind of broken right now for Omen, and I hope Alan is looking into how to add that new Omen version to the Gnosis Safe library. And I really hope this will fix it, because then we can actually like proceed with playing around with the Omen squad.
Yeah, Chris, and I like your descriptive name is good, but you could even take out token, just call it conditional yield farming, which is what it kind of is. You don't need token, I guess. Like conditional yield farming, it's basically yield farming with certain condition attached, or conditional liquidity farming is what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I'm always thinking of memes though now, and how I know conditional just seems
cooler name.
Conditional just seems long.
Yeah, it's incentive, so it's like incentive farming.
I like Federico, yield planting, or something like that, right? You could lean. I think planting is it is kind of what you're doing, because this is like it really is introducing like the time component, and we've like talked about that. We were talking about this before about how to introduce a time component, and you were talking about like the snapshot kind of ideas, and that's something we do manually. But this is just a little bit cooler way of doing it.
What's farming? Well, like farmers who play like the long game, where you don't you rotate crops and stuff, and you like playing like
sustainable agriculture.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like it's like long game or sustainable planting.
It's almost something with the farmer's almanac, right? The farmer's almanac is like what every farmer is supposed to have, that like basically tells you when the seasons change, when like the sun will, gives you guidance on yearly rotations. So maybe something, I don't know. But I guess the two questions I have here are, one, is this something realistic that we could do for lots of different pools, and really kind of a way to manage, as we talk about how we have fees as a tool, even in the initial stage, is this something that we could do to incentivize liquidity in like tons of different pairs? And then two, do we want to do other types of reward programs, something more simple that people are more familiar with, whether it's just DXD rewards, or as some people floated, even the crazy idea of ETH rewards. But how do we think about this as like a sufficient solution to the liquidity incentive idea?
What was the question?
Would we want other incentive programs? Is this enough? Is this sufficient? I think is the best.
Oh, the Omen or the conditional?
Yeah.
I guess the issue is like you participate as a liquidity provider and some like the pool's at over 200 and then like some doofus takes out 50K and it goes below and then you don't get any reward, right? That could easily happen. The guy's incentivized not to probably, but one guy could screw it for everyone. That's a risk with the program, right? I agree he wouldn't get the reward, but some people don't always make economic decisions.
Right.
Someone could screw people just to screw people. That's a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm trying to get at is today is whether, because I think we need to get into the ideas of like, this is what the reward program will be. And I think we can adjust it and fine tune it. But I think we're coming to some understanding that reward program will be contingent on this Omen conditional yield farming.
Yeah, I would say that the Omen one is more of an experiment, which could be really cool, but it can't be the main core incentive program. It should be like 50% or something less than that. You would probably want to have known rewards in addition to the Omen experimental one, just for the sake of liquidity providers, knowing they're going to get something, and maybe they get a bonus if the Omen thing works out, which would be cool. Like you get this in ETH or something, and then you get a bonus if this Omen tokens work out.
What do people think about that? Even if it's just some DXD rewards, we'd run into some of the same problems. But
could we reward each liquidity provider individually and reward them based on how long they've been providing liquidity? And
yeah, I think we
almost like gamify or something.
Yeah, and Anton in the chat had proposed a cool idea where if you were the earlier ones, get a bigger, like the earlier you are and the longer you stay, you get a higher percentage of the. Well, he was talking about the fees.
You say the fees actually, not rewards, but actually.
Yeah.
So you sort of saying like effectively cap the pools and give the earlier entrants better rewards of the better portions of the fees.
It's easier to do with rewards. It's harder to do with fees, but the fees idea is a cooler, longer term idea probably, but it would take more technical work, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty serious. I don't know of any easy way we could do that. I would imagine it would be a pretty serious technical effort if it's even.
But with a few snapshots, we could do what Pulp is saying. Like, if you stay in the whole time, you get a more of a reward. You just have.
You can even cut deals. Like the DAO can make arrangements with people, right? Like if somebody's going to commit to, putting this much liquidity into this pool for so long, and they get this kind of incentive to do so. Yeah, or we could arrange something where it's like you gamify it a little bit, and maybe the first person to commit for this much or whatever gets a little more, and so on.
Cool. Let's just because thinking about time, let's just keep going to the close off here and then circle back on where we stand. And then just the pool governance, as something to look forward to. This is not necessarily the liquidity incentives or the launch patterns. This is kind of what we're hoping to distinguish in the long term. I haven't fleshed this out as much as I was hoping to, but I have kind of some ideas in the short term, right? Pool fees are managed by DXDAO and will be interesting, and we'll experiment with different things there. And it also, I think, as John was saying, is a potential partner in the medium term, right? We're going to have the LP guild, I think, which is a good, will manage the fees themselves. And then we'll also have a updated UI with that. And then long term, I think, pair governance, asset governance of liquidity pools is going to be important to that. And so, yeah, this is kind of what I thought is like the big steps or like the milestones over the next weeks and months for DXswap, providing liquidity from the treasury, conditional yield farming, router aggregation, and then LP guild governance and updated UI, and then our vision about a DeFi hub. So that was kind of it. And in terms of just reaching back on this, I think we have good consensus on using Omen Market and the conditional token yield farming. And then I think we probably, as Sky was saying, maybe we do want other LPs incentives and maybe design a little bit more of a traditional issuance pool and make the conditional tokens go on top of it. I think we feel pretty confident about the deployment pools. I guess we're going to try to go with maintain the low fees that can be adjusted there. And then, yeah, this is kind of the liquidity. Yeah, this is the DXD thing that we've done there. So thoughts, things that we need to decide, things we need to kind of do steps moving forward. Obviously, I left that a big one here at the end that we can talk about when we're ready. But what else do we kind of need to coordinate around?
Is it crazy for the liquidity farming to say something like, guys, anyone that's in by December 10th, and it's a 6-month period. If you stay for the 6 months, you're going to get DXD rewards, and they're going to be pretty attractive. And I know that people don't want DXD given out, but like you're there for 6 months to get this like pretty good reward and have like a really long-term view on it versus like 1 month or 2 months. Like, and some people will commit to 6 months because they're really those are the true believers in DXD will commit because they'll get a pretty good reward from that. Maybe it's even in ETH if we don't want DXD, but like a longer term request in place. Is that like, I don't think anyone's done that.
Yeah. I like the idea of having longer term lockups, basically, or commitments of the LP tokens.
Yeah.
And but I also think being very kind of targeted, right? Not doing any kind of blanket large yield farming program. It's going to dilute the token aggressively or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like a stepwise approach. Let's try to win DXD, get the best DXD ETH pool first, right? Get the experience feeling good. And I feel so I don't think we have to come out the gate with a great incentive program. I think we just need to figure out a good one to in the near term that we can kind of deploy piecemeal.
But having one or something on the launch to get some.
Yeah, something with the initial marketing push would be good.
Yeah.
I have another thought on the DXD ETH pool. Is it super hard technically right now for us to make it directional instead of make it a 50-50 pool? Because we're asking these DXD fans basically to provide liquidity, but this is a neutral pool as long as it's a 50-50 pool. We should make the pool bullish by making it like a 70-30 pool, something like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very fundamental change to the protocol. We have played around with this idea of we could fork because that's basically balancer, what you're talking about, right? Having the automatic, being able to set the weights in the pool.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, basically the short answer is yeah, it's hard. We couldn't just do that. But I think adding that functionality in a future version could be good. That's a deeper discussion, but yeah.
We are coming up to the hour. I did want to open it up to see if we wanted to talk about the brand and name of DXswap as we kind of come close to launch. I know there's been considering a whole bunch of new names for DXswap and what domain it will be hosted on, and there's a lot of questions on that. I think that is also something that we need to get to consensus on eventually. I know, Zet, you're leading this, and I don't think we can kind of pick or find out through screaming and shouting, and so we'll figure that out. But I think it's something we need to, come to consensus. But names are always tough.
Yeah, I don't think it's not only about names. I think the first answer we need to find is what do we want to see DXswap will be. And I think there are people who are already positioning DXswap as not only a Uniswap competitor, but something else. And that's like, I think that is way more important to find consensus about like where this product will progress. And like, do we actually want to progress into something else than just like swap protocol and front end with governance built in? And if we find find consensus about the question hub or swap, then we can actually like think about the brand.
I mean, I think DXDAO can do a lot more than swap protocols, and we already have a few things. But I think like where we go next, like after launching DXswap, after this kind of roadmap that Chris laid out, that's like a pretty big, I think that's a bigger strategy discussion. So I don't think of that as like DXswap, right? Like I think of that as DXDAO, like what is DXDAO going to do next?
Right. It's I mean, what you're describing is just like, we just delayed the consensus finding about that very important question after we did the swap. Why not?
I'm not saying we delay that consensus finding. I'm saying we should start that as soon as we can, but I anticipate that it's going to take a little bit of time to work that out.
100%. But I think we can find consensus about hub or swap, like as like this will be. I think it's important that we can that we already can say what it will be, because we can't just like say it is just the swap now and we will soon like later on, or like while we launch on stealth mode, we will think about what it is.
But I mean, for right now, what we have is a swap, right? So a Uniswap fork with governance.
Yep.
We don't have anything else lined up. We haven't discussed anything else. So I think, in terms of the next few months, we need to think of this as a swap protocol. I mean, now I agree with you. We can start thinking ahead. Like, what do we do next? Is it a balancer, compound? Like, what do we want at lending? Like, what do we want to do? Is that, does that consume DXswap into a new product? Like, yeah, maybe. But like, I don't know if we can do that in the time, in this time frame that we're looking at with DXswap.
Yeah, Chris, I don't remember what was the like deadline for like the potential deadline for this baby is out on ENS.
Deadlines sounding so
yeah. I actually I would bet that I'm not sure like how fucking busy Zed is, but if Zed and me sit down and actually like think about what DXswap should be and come up with some bold vision, I don't think it will take more than 2 weeks.
So
I mean, have you been paying attention to the other decisions we've been making?
There's an on-chain track record of it. Yeah. No, so I think we need to set a proposal to resolve the ENS domain, not next week, but the week after that. So that would be like November 16th to the 20th, because that's presuming that next week we get the mainnet contract deployment, and then we can do the ENS after that.
Right. Like my point is, everything we do is for swap, right? Like there's nothing we change, or like if we find an answer for the important question, which I just mentioned, that doesn't mean that we change anything. We continue the exact same path, what we kind of what you described in your document, but at the same time we need to sit down and like really envision this hub if it is a yes.
So I think I said this about layer 2s when we were talking about layer 2s. You know, I think DXDAO is in a strong position because it can kind of like ride the wave, right? And like the market is like going to move in a certain direction. And luckily we have all these inputs and a bunch of different like products so we can kind of decide. So I think we'll be ready to kind of move into whatever direction it is. And I think there's actually a pretty big distinction between, really, I guess you could say like a balancer, super big AMM, or some type of major AMM like upgrade. 2, you could say lending. 3, you could also say like derivatives. Or you could say like a privacy focused thing. So I think there's a whole bunch of like areas we could go, but like I think it's hard. As I say, I think we want to like ride the wave in there. And then I think specifically to DXswap, and we're trying to launch a product, whatever, maybe launch is the wrong word, but like that product and is what it is like now, right? That's a swap experience. And so even if we're like building a brand for something else long term, like when that product launches, it's going to launch with the swap experience. So the brand and the name will need to coincide with the swap experience. Now it'd be really great if that brand could maybe expand into the hub motion. It'd be really, really fantastic if that brand was so flexible that it could like ride the wave as DXDAO does. But I think like we know what it needs to, the brand and name needs to convey in the next month, because we have to, you know, it's got to be hosted on a domain there, and it's going to be a swap product. And so like that I feel like that's the first requirement, and then those
right.
other.
Like I mean, we saw with Cream that they started the opposite way.
Geronimo, I mean, these are good. I think you're going in a good direction here, but like we are, you know, 3 months into development on DXswap and a week away from launch. This is the wrong time to rebrand and like change the whole concept of what we're doing, right? Like this is the wrong.
It's not changing the whole concept.
You need to start a separate effort to like get consensus from the DAO that like this is a bigger direction we'll go in, and then we figure out how that, you know, that works.
There is no huge change. If we find an answer to the important question, the only thing.
You're saying if we come up with a giant roadmap in a week, which is not going to happen.
No, I'm not saying that.
It's just not going to happen.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
we have a name and a brand, right? Like
Cream started with Cream started with just borrowing and lending, and somehow.
How is this name and brand going to be independent of the roadmap and figuring out what it actually does?
So at the beginning, people thought Cream is just a compound fork, but what it is now, it is a balancer fork and a compound fork. So why can't
So it's already changed, right? So, yeah, so you're defeating your own argument. What's the point of, what are you even suggesting?
I'm suggesting that we are not introducing 2 brands, but just 1 brand. What you're proposing is
we don't know what the second one is.
Well, that is the question.
We have one thing. That's a big question.
Right.
It's a very big question.
Not really. Yeah. Maybe we can decide
not
for one brand,
because you already have your mind made up, but the DAO has, you know, hundreds of other people.
It is just a name and a logo.
I think there's famous last words. I think there's like, you know, kind of something similar to we're discussing with Sky yesterday about mix, where like I understand the perspective, but it's like very hard to compare without something. There's nothing to compare to, right? Like if we come up with a name that like does all those things and a brand that like you're talking about, Geronimo, then like that makes sense. But it's hard to have that conversation of like what we need right now versus the hypothetical that we'll find something. What is it, like one bird in your hand versus two in the tree, or counting your eggs before your chickens hatch, or something like that. There's some saying to this that we can't really, like we don't, unless we have something to compare it to. I think it's hard to plan for that. I did watch some brand being developed on Twitter by, I don't know, Dennis Nazarov. I shared it with Zet, around a mirror that he's just kind of over the last like 2 or 3 weeks has just been like slowly showing his like artist board of how he's coming to an idea on a brand, and that's like interesting.